Hello, everyone. I am Melody and your host. Welcome to Author Nation. This is the show that takes your author career to new heights. Today, we are talking about slowing down to get more done. And I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Get ready for a fun and lighthearted conversation packed with valuable insights, all tailored to help you excel in the world of nonfiction. We're here to make your author journey more profitable and more enjoyable, as it should be. As part of the Author Nation community, you'll find a treasure trove of resources at authornation.online. At authornation.online, from writing tips to marketing hacks. Okay, grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and get ready to unlock the secrets of slowing down so you can speed up. Our guest, Leona Morrison, is the founder of Inner Fire, Outer Light, which helps overwhelmed and undervalued artists, creatives, and wellness professionals make a living, make a life, and make a difference with their gifts. Trained in visual art, writing, music, peace and global studies, education, facilitation, and creative business and life coaching, she has worked as an activist, toured nationally as a folk singer, songwriter, and spent more than a decade as a coach helping people thrive at the intersection of creativity and social impact. Her forthcoming handbook for creative changemakers inspires, educates, and empowers. Welcome, Leona. How are you today?
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled that you're here. Oh, wait. I must ask, because you do a lot of things, right? So you're involved in so many projects. When we did our pre-chat, you have like, wow, you do a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about all the things you're involved in?
Absolutely. So me and my partner are both project people. We've kind of given up thinking that we're just going to do one thing with our lives. And so just accepted it, embraced it. So the work that I've been doing for the past almost 12 years now, working with creatives, has been so rewarding, and I really enjoy that. I also run my family's wellness products business that's been around for 50 plus years. So that's a fun family legacy to carry on. And we have a farm animal sanctuary with lots of rescued critters that we let live out their lives in peace. So our lives are full and rich, we like to say, full and rich.
Exactly. Okay, my brain is saying, how can you be doing this and not feel overwhelmed and burnt out, right? So just running one business, let alone two businesses. I grew up in a farm. I know what it's like to be caring for animals. Have you, in the past, have you been in that place of overwhelm and burnout and frustration in the past?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, actually, I pretty spent my young adult years kind of lurching from one thing to the next. And I use the word lurching intentionally because I would do something that I thought was meaningful, that I cared about, throw myself into it wholeheartedly, and burn out. And I did it over and over again. So it was a little bit of a slow learner. But I'm really actually fortunate that I have a chronic health condition. So physically, I would get so exhausted and sick that I would have to stop. I think a lot of people spend decades on that edge of burnout, but they don't have something that forces them to stop. And so I was lucky that it forced me to stop enough times that I finally paid attention and said, you know what? This is not a sustainable way of being in the world. I need to do something different.
Yeah. Oh, and so how did you find your peace?
Such a good question. Yeah, for me, I think the key is that I needed to stop paying attention to the generalized messaging about how you run a business, how you're successful, how you kind of are seen as successful by the world, which was pretty hard for me because I grew up as a people pleaser, and all of that was sort of deeply ingrained. And so I really, really wanted people to think that I had it all together, right? Like that was like the most important thing. But once I was able to let go of that a bit and realize that I don't do well when I'm rushed, I tend to flub things up. I tend to do things poorly. I'm unsatisfied with the results, and just sort of accept some of my actual true nature and then my actual limitations. And a lot of the people I work with have limitations for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're caregivers, or they have other things that they're involved in that they're really passionate about, or maybe they have health issues. And I really like working with people for whom that let's work 90 hours a week and try to earn $1 million model is really not, doesn't work for them. Because that's true for me. And I found that if I could just let go of the expectation that I would do everything really fast and I could slow down, then I was able to do so much, which was really surprising.
Yeah. I really like that you mentioned one of the things you were focused on was making it look like everything was okay on the outside. Because I think we're encouraged to do that in today's world of social media. We are encouraged to use social media to make it look like everything is fine. And a lot of people I'm aware, a lot of people who are out there on social media are going, everything's fine. They're not okay, right? Things aren't fine. And we already, as humans, we already have this, don't show weakness in us. And then when we have that outer messaging as well, saying, show us the good side, show us the good side, nothing should be bad, don't tell me about the bad, it gets worse, doesn't it?
It does. And it's really isolating. I think, especially when you do the kind of business like writers do and a lot of solopreneurs do, where it's mostly you all the time anyway. If you don't have the ability to speak truth about your situation in a way that's a little bit more open and public, then it can feel incredibly isolating and depressing. And so I learned that this whole concept of vulnerability, in fact, I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. We're kind of sold this idea now that like you should look perfect all the time, but you should also be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And somehow if you find that magic mixture, then everyone will love you and it will all be okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about is like that's not actually the point of vulnerability. Like vulnerability, there's not a guaranteed reward. Like sometimes you're vulnerable and people abandon you or they don't respond or whatever. But and this is what I found, if you're willing to do it, then you can be at peace with yourself. And that's what really made a difference for me is that I stopped trying to perform for everybody else. If I could be honest that I had limitations, if I could be honest that this wasn't going to get delivered on the schedule I thought it was or whatever it was, then I could take a deep breath and do a good job and deliver something quality, and not be so worried about that part of it. And then eventually what happened is that the people who came to me really did respond to that. They were like, "Oh, that's a thing you can do? Like you can do that in the world? Yes, I would like that, please."
Yeah.
And now I love who I work with as a result of that.
Yeah.
But it took some courage because it was scary at first to say that.
That makes perfect sense. So tell us, let's talk about slowing down to speed up. Can you just start by explaining what this means to you? And then maybe how it can benefit nonfiction authors?
Absolutely. So despite, I have my own limiting factors, but what I've seen time and time again, even with sort of fast-paced, high-performing people, is that it's really tempting to just plow forward, just go as fast as possible, as far as possible on this sort of vision that we have. But what I see time and time again with those folks is that they'll sort of run forward and then something will stop them, right? They'll sort of run into a wall or something will happen and will stop them. And then they'll realize, like, oh, this isn't actually where I wanted to be. You know? It's so easy when you're charting your own course, like authors are doing, to veer off. You have this sort of vision, but if you just slightly go away, it doesn't take very much before you're all the way over here. And if we don't sort of look up every so often, then we can find ourselves way off course. And so the first part of slowing down to speed up is just really making intentional time to pause and check in. Is this still working for me? Am I still on the path that I want to be on? Are the costs of this path working for me? That kind of thing. And so having that intentional time to pause and check in and evaluate and assess. A lot of standard careers have that kind of assessment built in, but self-guided things like being an entrepreneur and author really don't. So we have to create it. We have to pause and slow down. And I find that if we can do that and take that time for reflection, what often happens is that we get to our destination much faster, months, years faster, because we're not veering off course all the time, putting our energies in all these wrong places.
Yeah.
The other sort of piece of that I think that's really important is that especially when you're doing something like being an author, there are a million people out in the world telling you the 9,000 things that you need to do, that you need to pay for, that you need to invest in, that you need to focus on. And it can be really overwhelming and very easy to sort of go, well, what first? What now? And slowing down and getting good guidance from somebody who really knows the path is really an effective way of doing the right thing at the right time and not wasting a lot of time and money.
Yeah, yeah. I want to just bring something back that you said a little while ago about the 1%, right? If you're on track and you go off 1%, it doesn't feel like a lot, but you keep going off 1% and you will definitely land up in a completely different place than where you meant to, right? So it's so interesting that it's just a slight deviation, but those slight deviations, that if we keep up with them, it just completely derails us. A train is completely derailed by 1%, right? So yeah, excellent. Thank you. So what are some practical ways to implement this in your life? Do you spend a bit of time each week reflecting, or what else might we do?
Usually when people kind of want to start the slowing down to speed up process, I recommend that they spend time each week, either at the beginning of the week or at the end of the week. And you kind of reflect back on the previous week. How did things go? What worked? What didn't work? What did I get done? What didn't I get done? And sort of where am I now versus where was I a week ago? And a week is not a very long chunk of time. So eventually, once you're sort of in this habit of reflection, then you might only have to do it once a month or once a quarter. But for most people who are relatively new on the journey to building something of their own, then having that weekly thing is a really, really good place to start in that slowing down to speed up process. There's another piece of this that I haven't mentioned yet that I think is super important, and I call it starting from enough. And it's this idea that there's a perception that we always need to do more. And especially if you're self-employed or you're an author or something like that, you can feel kind of like you're back in school again, and there's always homework to be done, and there's always something sort of looming over your head. And so this idea that like if I know that I am enough, I have enough, and I do enough, then I'm not trying to do more all the time, but I'm using that pause and assessment time to say, am I doing the right things for me and for my project right now?
Yeah.
Because we do have to say no to things in order to say yes to other things. But that's a great way to use that weekly time, is to say, like, yeah, how am I spending my time?
Yeah. And I know the people listening are saying, I don't have time for that. So, when you already have an overwhelming to-do list, how can you prioritize this reflection and this slowing down time? Like, how do you justify it? How do you convince people?
Yeah, it's
a
an
tough
inner
question.
it's a tough question. It's an inner job. I mean, there's a quote that was supposedly Mahatma Gandhi said. I don't know if he actually did, but it would make sense. Where people would say, like, what do you do in the morning before a regular day? And he would say that he meditated for half an hour. And they'd say, okay, but what if it's a really busy day that you have? And he would say, then I would meditate for an hour.
Yes.
Right. And I think that really is the heart of it. But it's so countercultural in our society that if you will stop, if you will reflect, you will get more done. And so you kind of have to like trick your brain for a little while until you have some physical evidence of this, and realize that like the most profitable, the most productive thing that you can do is to pause and reflect.
Yeah.
And it takes a little practice, and you're going to not do it well for a while, and you're going to find yourself like doing lots of other things that feel more productive, like, I don't know, cleaning the bathroom or whatever, anything else. But after a while, you start to get evidence like, oh, this actually is working.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that. I love that, and I'll tell a little story around that. So I'm like you, go 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 projects and this that and the other, and I eventually learned that if I would work for a certain amount of time and then take a break
Mm-hmm.
and then go back to work, I would be more productive than if I worked through. And so we think we don't have time to take a break, to unwind, to take 5 minutes of mindfulness, to empty our brain. And we don't think we have time for that. And what I found was when I do take time for that, I'm more productive in the hours I'm actually working. And so this is what you're saying as well. If we take that time away to reflect, to become mindful, the hours we do work become more productive. And in the end, you work fewer hours and yet you get more done.
That's right. And it's more satisfying. It's less tiring. I mean, I guess the argument really is you don't have time not to do this.
Yes.
But it often takes us years to really like embody and realize like, oh, the cost of the way that I'm doing things is so high, right? I'm wearing down my health. I'm wearing down my mental well-being. I'm engaging in unhealthy habits because I keep trying to push through, that kind of thing. So again, I feel very lucky as a person who's not able to push through, but take it from me, your body would stop you if it could. So learn to stop yourself, and you'll get to enjoy life more. And in the end, you'll end up with work that you feel better about, that you're more proud of, that you can put out into the world because it will be quality work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can testify that you can learn this lesson, start practicing it, do well, and then forget it.
Totally. Oh yeah. I'm always relearning.
Yeah, get completely sucked back into the I must work 50 hours a day. And I can testify that you have to constantly remind yourself, no, that's not going to work. You've tried that failed. You're doing something new around. Okay. So how can authors who are feeling overwhelmed and who feel they can't do this, how can they shift their mindset to embrace the idea of enough?
Such a good question. And there's been there's so much sort of out there on mindset, but what the science tends to be showing these days is that we can't really believe our way into action. Like, it's not just enough to say, okay, I believe I am enough. And then voila, magically we all believe that, right? If only. It would be so lovely. But we have to actually act our way into belief. And so I often tell people, like, you sort of think of yourself as an incorruptible child, like bribe yourself, create incentives, do everything that you can to get yourself to do the little actions that will build evidence for yourself, right? Like, this works, oh, I remember that felt good. I should do that again. So I sometimes use exercise as an example because I'm very health focused, but exercise is definitely my Achilles heel. It's the thing I would just not do if I could avoid it. And even though I care a lot about health, I won't exercise for my health. Like, it's not like a big enough motivation. I'm embarrassed to say, but clearly not embarrassed enough not to tell everybody. Because what I learned is that when I exercise, my mental well-being is so much better. Like, I'm less stressed and anxious, and I like feel better in my mind and my emotional life. And I will do it for that reason, but not for the other reason. But I had to actually do it for a while in order to discover the reason that I would do it, right? So now I have that inner motivation. So we sometimes have to do that. We have to kind of like trick ourselves into doing something for a little while and then be like, why would I keep doing this? Let's find my reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you said something about, small steps, small wins. The other
Mhm.
piece of advice I would add into that is that you should celebrate those small wins. So many people, I help people write books and they want to wait to celebrate until they have the book published. I'm like, no, there are so many milestones. In fact, what I've done in the community is I've broken down the path to a book into milestones. So
Great.
one, they can focus on now. This is the
Mhm.
milestone I'm on. This is what I'm doing. And two, every time they hit a milestone, they get to celebrate. And so
Right.
we have a series of milestones that are smaller steps that we can celebrate, because celebration, success and celebration is a momentum builder.
Absolutely. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so important. Yeah, I have that practice of celebration that we build into our community calls and into our different activities because we don't pause and celebrate these things in our society. And I often use the example of making a quilt because even people who don't make quilts understand that it is a long and multi-part process, right?
Yes.
And writing a book is the same kind of way. So if you put on your to-do list each day, make quilt,
No.
and you had half an hour on your list, your brain, smart brain, would look at that and be like, well, that can't happen in half an hour. So we're going to skip over it and go to the next thing. So I
Yes.
often find people are like, well, why don't I never getting to this item? I'm like, because it's not an item. Like you put a giant project on your
Yes.
list. If you put instead, look through pattern books and choose 3 patterns I like, then
Yeah.
my brain would look at that and would be like, I could do that in half an hour. All right,
Yes.
let's do it. Right.
I love it.
And that's that milestone thing, really understanding that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And
Yeah.
really creating space for that and having a community that helps you celebrate. It's very
Yeah.
important.
No, I love that. It's funny because the milestones, we have the project of the book, we have stages of publishing. Each stage has milestones. Each milestone has action steps, just like what you've said,
Yeah,
right? That's exactly how I work with my clients. We have 5 stages of publishing. Each stage is milestones. Each milestone has action steps. They all start with a verb. You can do them in a certain amount of time.
that's right.
It's like that's what's on your calendar, not make a quilt. Which reminds which brings me to the next question. When people, they love making quilts and they think, well, I'd like to make a quilt, or I'd love to write a book, but I have all these other things going on, things that my children need care. In your case, your
Mhm.
animals need care as well.
Yeah.
I need to make money.
Mhm.
I need to spend time with family. I need to support whatever,
Yeah.
and then they're like, book.
Yeah. Where
How
does
does
it
that
fit?
fit in, right?
Mhm.
So when you slow down to speed up, how do you find time? Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe the word is balance. I'm not sure. I believe in life balance, but uh, I've never found it anyway. But how do we fit in that quote unquote extra thing that we're so in love with doing, that we're so passionate about, but is only for us,
Hmm.
and it's not about all those other responsibilities we have.
Right. That's a great question. And I think especially for people who are socialized as women, there's this expectation that everybody else's needs and desires and whatever need are more important somehow. So we've got a various numbers of barriers to overcome to make that a reality. But one of the things that I've realized over the years is that things like writing a book, learning a language, an instrument, that kind of doing that creative work, doing that work that's about passionate self expression or getting a message out into the world or making an impact or even long term growing a business, things like that. Um, that work has such potential for creating deep happiness over time. And if we remember that we're not good partners, we're not good friends, we're not good parents, we're not good neighbors or whatever, unless we have a well that we can draw from of deep happiness and sustaining meaningful purpose, then it can be helpful to realize, like, okay, there are a variety of ways of making money. Maybe the way I'm making money right now is taking away from this meaningful well of deep purpose. Maybe I need to reevaluate that and see how I can put them together. Or maybe all the, ultimately the people that I'm caregiving are going to be happier to have less time with me that is happier and more connected and more focused time. I'm not sitting playing on my phone trying to distract myself. I'm really present, really with them, because I've done what I need to do for me, right? So in a way, it's a form of self-care, which is an overused term, but it is, to me, it's like the holistic part of the puzzle that, health and wellness and mental well-being and creativity all go into this sort of thing called self-care. And it's what fuels our relationships. It's what allows us to do work well in the world and have sustainable lives. And so that's actually one of the reasons I started my Simple Self-Care Circle, is I found that that was such a foundational piece to having a business, to finishing creative projects, to just being a human. And it can feel so overwhelming. So breaking it down into very simple steps that we can do and having community to support it makes such a difference.
Yeah, love it. So you've used the word self-care, which of course brings the question up for me, what do you mean by self-care? Because I still see people out there saying self-care is that bubble bath, or self-care is drinking a bottle of wine on Friday with my best friend, or self-care is,
Right.
how do you define self-care?
Self-care starts fundamentally as an inside job. It's things like boundaries and making healthy decisions for ourselves. There are lots of different strategies and tactics, I would call them, that can go into self-care. Sometimes it might be a bubble bath, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And for some people, they'll never take a bubble bath and they have excellent self-care. Totally fine, right? Self-care doesn't have to cost money, although it sometimes does. That kind of thing, I think that it starts with this like belief that I am worthy of health and well-being and mental health and well-being, and that doing what I need to do to nourish that allows me to do everything I need to do in the world. The other piece of that I think that we don't mention often enough is something that's generally called community care. We have this idea that like, okay, so I'm responsible for my self-care. But not all people have equal access to the things that make self-care possible. And even if we do, it can still feel overwhelming, right? Even if we come from a place of privilege and we have money and time and access, it can still feel overwhelming. And so I think having a community aspect where we really hold each other and lift each other up is such a vital piece of that puzzle too. To really make it all possible. Because that, again, we're just sort of buying into that unrealistic expectation that I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to have it all together.
Yeah.
I'm going to run 5 miles and do yoga and make a healthy meal and, plus earn money, plus write a book, plus, whatever. And that's where it starts to feel like, whoa, because that is unrealistic, right?
Yeah.
That's not how we get things done. We get things done together.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you just said about having all these things and the idea of boundaries came back. You mentioned that earlier. I think a lot of people find themselves with all these things on their to-do list and yet find themselves sitting at the table staring out the window, or sitting on the sofa staring at the TV, or sitting in bed staring at their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you create boundaries for yourself? How do you find the motivation when you feel so overwhelmed to just get started on this path?
Yeah. Jennifer Loudon has a lovely term that she calls shadow comforts. So things like scrolling through social media, binge watching shows, binge eating, whatever, those kinds of things are often what's called shadow comforts. We do them when we're tired and overwhelmed, but they ultimately make us feel worse afterwards. Whereas true comforts actually self-soothe and they make it, and we come out of it feeling rested and better. And so I think often the first stage of that is to say, what do I actually need right now when I'm doing this? And often when I talk to people, they're like, how do I get started on my creative project, for example, right? Like, how do I want to do that? I'm like, great, we'll get there. But it sounds like you need sleep.
Yeah.
So maybe take a nap instead of scrolling through social media. You'll find that the half hour sleeping is going to leave you so much more refreshed and able to face things than a half hour scrolling. And so sometimes it's just switching those shadow comforts for real comforts and addressing our actual needs and starting to learn to pay attention to those actual needs.
Yeah.
And then we can get to the point where we say, it's work to sit down and write for 20 minutes, but I know I'll feel better at the end of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Once we can kind of train ourselves into like looking to the other side of this period of time and saying, what's going to make me feel better versus what's going to make me feel worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And something we haven't spoken about, but I think it's especially important for women. And I'm not a man, and I don't have a male experience. So if you're a guy out there who like totally relates with this, please comment, let me know. But I think women do a lot of things that don't serve them. And maybe men do too, or they do a lot of things they don't need to do. I know when my kids were growing up, I felt I had to have healthy meals on the table, right? 100% of the time, home cooked, healthy meals. And and I'm not saying I shouldn't have given healthy meals to my children,
Right.
but maybe I didn't need to work quite as hard as I did at it, right? Maybe I could have let go. So how do we, if we're going to really focus on our needs and make our time productive on the things that serve us, how do we let go? How do we figure out what doesn't serve us, and how do we let go of those things?
Such a great question. So there's a rule in nutrition that it's what you do 80% of the time that matters more than what you do 20% of the time. And it's actually super comforting, right? Like if 8 out of 10 times I'm eating a healthy meal, then those 2 times don't really matter that much. As long as I kind of keep that up. And I think this is actually a great rule for life because many of us are trained to like give 110%, as if that's even a thing, all the time to everything. And the truth is, for most, especially your audience, especially these like smart entrepreneurial author, writer people, the world doesn't need 100% from you, unlike most of what you do. Honestly, if you gave it 75, 80% to your job, to this, to that, to the other thing, I mean, they would all think you were giving 100% because they'd be getting great results from you.
Yeah.
And you would have all that in reserve. I often talk about, one of my free gifts is called Space to Create, because people think that time is what they don't have, but really what they don't have is mental space. And that's what you free up when you pull back and say, you know what, maybe I only need to give 80% to that parent teacher conference or that job that is not so fulfilling or whatever. And you'll be surprised. You give 80% and they go, great job. And you think, oh goodness, I could have been doing this the whole time.
Yes. And I just want to say 80% doesn't mean not be present. It doesn't mean, 20% of the time on your phone.
No.
It just means not putting all of your energy into that one thing and being exhausted afterwards, right?
That's right. Hold back some energy.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
That came up with another question and I've forgotten it. So now that we have the time, and so we have been reflecting, we've been taking more breaks, we're becoming more productive, we don't have to be that uber busy. That messaging out in the world is telling us that we're now not good enough. We're back to not good enough. Okay. It's just like, I'm going to ask another not good enough question. Yeah, we're back to that messaging. It's like, what do you mean you have time to go for a run every day? And what do you mean you have your book done, even though you've been running and you took your family out for dinner on Friday, right? So how do we deal with those not enough feelings, or how do we deal with the messaging that comes from the world about what we should be doing, even if it isn't serving us?
Yeah. This cult of busyness thing is very real. And so one of the first things I did was that I stopped telling people that I was too busy to do something.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's such an easy excuse. It's acceptable in every occasion. I'm sorry, I'm too busy. But I would say something, I would just be a little bit, just like a fractionally more information. I would say, like, I'm sorry, that time is booked, or I have another commitment, or I have chosen to do something else with that time. And just the like slight change in language, what it said to me wasn't, you're so busy, you're so busy, you're so busy, you're so busy, feel overwhelmed. It was, I have choice. I have agency. I can choose what I do with my time. And you know what? I don't actually have to explain that to anybody or justify it or anything, because all I would have to say is, like, no, I have an appointment, and that appointment might be going to the gym, or that appointment might be taking a nap. That appointment might be sitting down and working on my book. It doesn't matter. It's totally just as legitimate. I legitimize it. And then it's amazing how other people do too, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
would start putting things in my voicemail, on my email signature line, and other things, just setting those boundaries. If you work from a home and office, putting something on your door that talks about when you can knock and when you cannot knock, this little simple things. But if you will set the parameters for yourself, and if you will change your language for yourself on how you talk about that, then you'll watch how most people, not everyone, but most people will respond positively. And suddenly you're not this uber busy person anymore. You're a person who chooses to do what's important to them.
Yeah. I really love what you said. You said something about not giving excuses. So we seem to feel obligated to give everyone a reason why. And yet we're not obligated to other people. Like, if somebody wants my time, I'm not obligated to give them my time. If somebody wants my mental energy, I'm not obligated to give them my mental energy. So why are we giving people reasons why we can't? What's wrong with just no? No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that won't work for me,
Yeah.
right? Can you help me solve this problem? No, I'm sorry, I cannot. Right?
Yeah.
You'll have to do that on your own today, right? Especially in parenting, right? It's
Right.
something that, I now say to my kids, right? It's like, oh, well, you could solve that, right? And now they know, don't come unless, sometimes my youngest calls me and says, I swear I've done everything. I swear I've tried everything.
You're like, all right.
Right? Right. Right. But we don't owe people explanations or reasons, do we? So why do we feel like we do?
Yeah. It's, again, there's this cultural belief and expectation, and many of us were raised with it, that our answer would always be yes. And that whatever anybody would ask, it would, that we would try to work to make that happen. And to me, I came to a point where I realized that it was like absurd, because I would scramble to do things for complete strangers that I had no relationship with, that would then cause me to not be available to do things for the people I cared about. And I just thought, wait a minute, what is going on here? Right? It was so out of hand. And so I just finally had to get to the point where I looked up a list of how to say no. I mean, this sounds kind of silly, but there were like here are 8 different ways to say no. And I thought, like, I just couldn't do the one that was just no. I wasn't there yet, But I started by saying, well, I can't do that, but here's what I could do. Or, you know what? I cannot do that this week. I could in 2 weeks. Would that work for you? All those different like ways and little methods. And I started practicing those. And you know what? The world did not end. People did not get mad at me. It was okay. And again, I had to build that belief by action, right? So once I did that enough times, I was like, oh, this is a thing that works. Like people are fine. Go figure.
Yeah.
Then I was able to just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it took a while. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, as authors strive to balance their creative work, their social impact, what advice do you have for them in terms of setting realistic goals and maintaining a sense of fulfillment along the way?
hmm And I think the one key piece of advice, and this has been challenging for me to take over the years. So I hear if you're like, oh man, um, don't try to do this by yourself. I mean, the truth is that people that you see out in the world with their books that are making a difference, that are growing movements and communities and businesses and all that, they didn't do it by themselves. Don't believe for 1 second that they did. They had a team, they had support, they had coaches, mentors, guides, community, supportive family members, friends, etc. And so the sooner that you can reach out and get that help, the easier it's going to be, the faster it's going to be, the more meaningful it's going to be. And honestly, the bigger impact you'll make because you're already reaching people, even as you're in process.
Exactly. Thank you, Leona. If you'd like to learn more about Leona, you can go to innerfireouterlight.com. It's in the description and it's in front of you on the screen. All right, you have a book coming out, a creative handbook. Can you just tell us a little bit about it? Give us a teaser.
Sure. So I love working with people who are creative and are passionate about changing the world and that they want to bring those things together. But for most of us, the reality is we can't really do that without also earning a living. And so bringing those three things together can feel like it's just too much or too hard, or where do we even begin? So I've been teaching and coaching and training people to do this for about 12 years now. And I thought it was high time. I just didn't see anything out in the world that really guided people through that particular process of creating a business or organization where they can make that impact, express their creative gifts, and get all of that done and earn a living. So it's basically a step-by-step process of walking people through discerning, making decisions about how to get started, how to get off the ground, and how to get earning and making a difference in the world. So I'm excited about it. It's as you know, it's a multi-part process. So
Yes.
we're the manuscript is in second draft stage, and we're working on the book proposal and getting that out. And so it's gonna be great. But hang in there.
Yeah, absolutely. But you do have something for us now.
Mhm.
It was a space to create 5-day challenge. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is especially for people working on creative projects and they're just finding that time, that space is just so hard to consistently create for themselves. So this is a 5-day challenge. It takes less than half an hour each day, but it walks you through some different processes, tools, resources, and methods that you can go ahead and start implementing so that you can be creating regularly and really moving forward on that project. And if you're in the social change realm and that's really exciting for you, there's a free gift for you there as well. So enjoy both of those.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Leona, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I've really appreciated all your insights today.
Yours too. It's been so much fun. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Leona. Okay, and that is a wrap on season 2, everyone. Season 2 of Author Nation Interviews comes to an end right here. So thank you for joining us. If you missed any of the episodes in the first 2 seasons, now is a great time to catch up because we will be back in the fall with season 3, packed full of authors and experts here to help you succeed as a nonfiction author. We will see you then.